Welcome, everyone. Thanks. We're excited to have you. Welcome to our webinar for Solar for Your Home. Thanks for signing up. It's a pleasure to have you. So we're going to do this over about an hour. We're not going to take too much time. Beyond that, we'll try and end at 1 o'clock Eastern. We are recording this webinar, so you're aware. The first thing we'd like to do actually is, before we begin, we'd like to take a moment to communicate our respect, recognition, and appreciation of Indigenous peoples' practices and ways of knowing. Ontario is home to many diverse First Nations, Inuit, and Métis people. SolarShare's projects are located on the traditional and unceded territories of many Anishinaabe First Nations, including the Ottawa, Algonquin, Ojibwe, Mississaugas of the Credit, and Saugeen First Nations. We are grateful for the opportunity to live, work, and gather together on this land. So the format, we're going to have my colleague, Bob Ross, who does all of the operations and maintenance for our facilities, speak to you for the most part today. We do have a question and answer function in the webinar, so please take advantage of that. If you have any questions, I'm going to try and manage those questions as they come up, and we'll do our best to answer as many of them as live as possible during the course of the webinar. If you find that we didn't answer it, our intention is to have some time at the end of the webinar to try and answer those questions for you that we don't get to. And if we don't get to your question today, we will be interested in speaking with you more. So we'd love your feedback after the webinar. And if there's other topics that you'd like to hear about from us, then including more solar, obviously, for your home, then we're happy to do that. So as I said, we'll try and end by 1 p.m. And one thing before as we get going here, I'm just going to launch a poll to let us get to know who's here, and help us craft what we're talking about. So here we go. I'm going to launch this opening poll and take some time to fill it out as we talk to you right now. So I'm going to take a couple seconds just to tell you about SolarShare for those of you who aren't aware. We are a not-for-profit cooperative based in Ontario. We have 51 projects across the province, making it all of microfit and fit nature. And 51 across the province, we have about 15 megawatts DC installed. We have more than 2,000 members, from whom we've raised more than, about $80 million at this point over time, and returned back to those members $12 million in interest. And so we can't do what we do without the support of our members, and we're really excited to be able to do this webinar with you as well. One other thing I want to note is to say, here's our projects are all across Ontario, actually. So you can see some of them up in Temiskaming, all the way over towards Ottawa, Arnprior kind of area in Ottawa itself, Kingston, the GTHA, over in southwestern Ontario, and up on Manitoulin Island, which I had the pleasure of visiting earlier this year. And one other thing before we move on to the fun stuff, we encourage you to check out our website, solarbonds.ca. You can see it there. There you can check out all of our sites, the real-time performance of our sites. You can sign up for our newsletter. You can read our blog. We try to send out a newsletter about once a month. And it'll tell you about more things like this that are coming. You can also purchase solar bonds. So right now we have 3 different options available for those of you who are interested. And we encourage you to check that out on our website, along with all the resources there. So here's the agenda for what we're going to talk about today. What to consider before you get going. Some key information that you want to have on hand or have reviewed as you start. Talking about site visits and virtual site visits, how we're going to do that and what that looks like. The installation and maintenance of your solar project on your home. What do you need to do? What does that look like? How it all works, some of the basics around the components for solar for your home. And we'll talk a little bit about the cost savings and loans and grants that are available for all of you. Okay. Bob has decades of experience with solar. He's been working with SolarShare for more than 6 years now, I think, Bob. And he does a great job in our systems, and he knows a heck of a lot about systems, residential systems as well. So without further ado, Bob, over to you.
Thank you, Chris. So let's start with our house, our residential house. What we're looking for are some really good roof types. We can install solar on metal roofs, asphalt roofs, tiled roofs, pretty much any kind of roof surface these days. We also like to see the roof to be fairly new, because these solar panels are going to go up for about 20 years, 25 years. Hopefully they'll last a lot longer than that. But so if we have a new roof, we're probably not going to have to take the roof down or the solar panels down. The other thing is, the neat thing about solar panels being on your roof is that it's going to protect your roof and give you an extra 5 to 10 years on your roof. The other thing we look at residential places is how much sunlight your roof gets. So if you got lots of sunlight, it doesn't really matter the orientation of your roof. It can be either south, east, or west, preferably not north. You only lose between 1% and 5% to be east or west. So we can do it pretty much on different angles. The average cost of solar panels on a residential home starts at about $10,000 and goes up into around the $30,000, $35,000, all depends on how many panels you put up, what type of inverters you use, and things like that. So other requirements, things that you'll need to do is get your installer to do. You're going to need a building permit, and then you're going to need a connection agreement with your LDC, which is your local distribution company. And these can all be done through your installer. You anticipate doing all that part of it. Key information that you're going to need when you first start to get an installer. One is you're going to need a recent bill, your hydro bill. They're going to need to know the account number. They're going to need to know who's actually on the account, the proper name of spelling it. They also will be able to tell you how much solar you need on your house to cover the amount of power that you're going to need for your house. The other thing we look at is also roof warranty. If you have any warranties on your roof, if you have a new roof, we want to make sure the manufacturer will cover it, even though we're putting solar on top of it. Your house insurance, you will have to insure your solar panels as well. It's just a rider on your insurance. Most house insurance is pretty used to that these days. And then we have lots of grants and loan programs that we'll talk about a little further on our list here. Free resources that you can access yourself. One is PV Watts. It does Canada as well as the United States. It will basically, you can type in your information. It uses Google to find your location, and it will basically tell you how much power you can make potentially at your place, at your home. The other one we can do is Solar TO. It's another good website. So if you're in the GTA, you can look at that, and it's got lots of good resources as well. And then the Canadian Renewable Energy Association also has a guide as well that you can get online and tell you about the solar itself. So,
Bob, I was curious. We talked about insurance. We have a question asking about insurance cost, and is it typical to see your insurance cost increase after you install solar panels?
It doesn't increase very much. It's just like installing a pool in your backyard, or putting an addition on your house. It's just a rider on it. It's usually not very much. It's fairly inexpensive.
Okay, so it's become more common over time, and it's not, because I know in my experience not that long ago, talking to commercial buildings, they had a different interpretation of the value of solar than I was surprised by it. So it's typically not as bad as it would have been, say, 10 years ago.
No, it's a lot easier. insurance companies have a general policy now with it. So,
Okay, great. Thank you very much.
so reputable installers. I always recommend that you get like 3 quotes. I have 4 right here, reputable installers that we use here at Solar. Most of these companies for quite a long time. They've been in the business, but there is other companies out there as well. But make sure you do your research into them. Make sure they've been around for a while. Get some references. If you need any help with that, you can always contact me, and I can give you some other installers as well, especially if you don't live in the GTA or around Southern Ontario. There is other installers all through Ontario these days. Site visit. Site visits could be one of the important things. It used to cost about $500 to have a team come out and assess your site. They would climb up on your roof. They would bring machines out there to see how much shading you had, things like that on it. The nice thing about today's technology world, there's a lot of virtual site programs out there that our installers use. They can actually go in either with Bing or Google Earth and find your house, and they can do it in 3D, and they can find out the shading on it. They can put on panels on your roof to see how many they can fit, what kind of wattage they can get out of it. And all this should be fairly free of cost to start with, just so you know roughly the ballpark figure of what it's going to cost you to install it. And you don't always have to go with the maximum amount of solar panels, but you can use your budget if you want, so you can reduce the amount of solar panels, or you can max it out, and the installer should be able to do this fairly quickly for you. It doesn't take very long.
Bob, another follow-up question on the tax issue. Do you see is there any impact on property tax that you're aware of?
Yeah, there's no impact on property tax, and it's written in the Green Energy Act that they can't raise your property tax because of renewable energy.
Interesting. Okay, we learn something new every day. Good to know. Also, are you aware of any installers in the Ottawa area? Sorry, everybody, I failed to get some installers from other parts of the province. Do you have any recommendations, or maybe we can send that out later?
Yeah, I can send that out later. You can always email me directly, and I can get you a bunch of installers out in Ottawa. Ottawa has quite a few, so.
Okay, great. So what we can do is maybe in a follow-up email to the attendees, we can mention a few other installers for other parts of Ontario so that folks have someone they can call that's local.
Yeah.
Okay, great. This isn't necessarily, there's one other question. I'll hold that for later, actually. Sorry, Bob, please go ahead.
So installation, monitoring, and maintenance. Installation, we have different ones. We have ground or roof installations. You don't have to put it on your roof. You can also put it on a garage. You can also put it on the ground if you want to. There's lots of different places to put it. All depends on the size of your property and how much sunlight we can get on the particular site itself. The maintenance and care, there's not a lot of maintenance and care for the average home. Without a track or anything else, there's no moving parts with it. So it's just electrical. All the inverters, solar panels, they're all sealed for the environment. They've all been tested. The glass on a solar panel is basically the same glass as your car windshield, so you don't have to worry about hail, things breaking it. It's very strong, things like that on it. And then monitoring is one of the big things that we like to talk about. People like monitoring. People like to see their solar panels do something. Because once you install them, they're up on top of the roof. They don't move or anything else. And you're always wondering, are they actually making power? And with all this new monitoring technology out there, that it's nice. You can have it on your iPhone. You can see how much power you're making, how much you're saving every day as we look onto it. So this is a typical ground-mounted system. easy, penetrating into the ground, can be pretty much located. This particular one has no moving parts as well, but you could put it into a tracker, a single axis or dual axis tracker. It's a bit more money, but it will give you about 40% more power.
Sorry, and Bob, I have a couple of questions here. Maybe this is a good time for them as we get into uh, some of these other questions, or get into the roofing versus ground mounted. And I guess, and just to clarify, so you know, it's possible to have ground mounted solar if you have the space to do it on your property. Is that right?
Yeah, and there is some municipal codes who um, have some rules of their own, but each municipality will be slightly different. So it all depends on where you live.
Yeah, that's a good point. The municipality has a big influence on, and the local distribution company, the utility, has a big influence on some of the parameters that we're talking about here. So it's always important to understand what the local conditions and requirements are.
That's right. And
Question.
the local municipality can't refrain from you putting it on your roof, but they can on the ground. All depends on where you're located. So,
Okay, interesting. I have a question here. It's is it better to install in a new build? I guess a new build home. Is that, I guess, is that easier than doing it on a home that's already been built?
no, they're about the same. The nice thing about the new built is that a lot of times you can hide the wires in the attic, and you can bring the wires down inside the building so you don't see the wires on the outside. And the other thing is you can get back at the time of designing the building, you can get your architect to design it so it's got nice big open spaces facing south, so you're going to get the maximum amount of power out of it. So,
Interesting. And can you talk a little bit about, as we move into solar, because we're going to talk about rooftops next. Can you quickly touch on like solar shingles? Like that's always been a big buzz thing, and Elon Musk goes and says we're going to do this, and then you don't hear anything about it. Do you have any sense of that, the status of that, or if it's even like I'm not even aware that they're commercially available in Canada? Is that, can you give us a bit more context?
Corning used to make solar shingles back in the 2009, 2010. The problem with solar shingles is they don't breathe very well. Electricity likes to be cold, so we raise our solar panels off the roof about 6 inches so the wind can get underneath it, and they're more efficient. Solar shingles also, you need double the amount of square footage on them because they don't produce as much power as our mono and poly panels that we use, our silicone panels that we use today. So right now, I don't know of anyone who's got solar shingles in Canada.
Okay.
So
okay. So the future is when we'll have that. Okay, cool. Just one. Let's see. One other. Well, I'll keep going, Bob, and I'm just going to try and keep up with the questions as we go. Sorry, everybody. I'll organize my thoughts.
So, looking at your roof, I put this picture up here just to show you that you can have multiple surfaces on your roof, different directions. It doesn't have to be that big. A lot of people think that their home, you can't put solar on it because it's got dormers on it or lots of chimneys, things like that. And usually we can work around that. We can use microinverters to run each panel to avoid the shading, different directions, things like that on it. And the nice thing about your roof is you don't use your roof for anything else. And a typical house like this, when you're on the ground, you can actually see the panels themselves. So the house looks just normal. And this house is producing around 14 kilowatts of DC power on a 10 kilowatt inverter. And it works out very, very well.
Interesting. And so, can you tell, is it possible to put, so we're talking about roofs, is it possible to put the solar panels on, say, carports?
Carports, I've done quite a few people's backyards over their decks, garages, pretty much anywhere.
Okay.
Solar panels don't weigh a lot, so they make it's pretty easy to install them. So,
and when we're talking about types of roofs, like I know that we need to make sure that the roof can bear the weight. Is that typically an issue with rooftop installations? Like, do folks need to
Rooftops,
have their roofs
yeah.
reinforced, or how does that work?
So rooftops themselves, if the house was built after the 1950s, underneath the Ontario Building Code, if it's built to the building code, you can take solar. Solar itself weighs about 3 pounds per square foot when it's installed, added to your roof, which is equivalent to an extra layer of shingles. So not a lot of weight. We spread the weight all over. Now, if we have to get in the attic and reboost it, add some 2x4s or 2x6s in it, we can do that as well. But we take pictures of it, we get it analyzed, we get a structural engineer to sign off on it.
Okay,
So
so it's
yeah. In certain places like the city of Toronto, you don't need a building permit anymore because all the buildings should be structurally safe if they're built from the 50s and up.
right. Okay. So a couple other questions here. I'm curious about similar to the solar shingles. What about like solar windows and stuff like that? Is that anywhere? Like, I know that the building integrated photovoltaic thing has been around for a while. I remember back in, gosh, the early 2000s, seeing someone talking about building integrated solar and how it was the sort of the future. And I haven't seen that really happen in the same way, I guess, as I thought it might. Do you see that happening anytime soon?
I see that happening relatively soon. I follow the market pretty well. It's mostly down in the United States in the hotter sort of areas that they are definitely doing a lot of building integrated. We have solar panels that now can be basically painted on. They can be embedded into normal glass. They can be printed just like from your printer. And these things are coming out into the more of the larger commercial scene. And I think it's going to filter down into the residential eventually. So
And if I understand it properly, some of the challenges with it are like actually just connecting the panels. So you have to lay electrical wire in different places that you wouldn't
yeah,
necessarily have to put it if you put it on the roof, which can get complicated.
that's correct. Yeah.
Okay, great. A couple other questions here, Bob, if you don't mind. Can you tell us a little bit more about roof types? So, for instance, someone asked a question about how advantageous is it to install panels on a standing seam steel roof? Are there any, if we're re-roofing our roofs, are there things we should pay attention to if we're trying to get ready for solar?
Sure. Metal roofs, a standing seam roof is probably the cheapest to put solar on, that we don't need any rails or anything else. We use these S clamps that will clamp right onto the seams onto it. So it's one of the cheapest ways because you're going to use a lot less material on them. And we've done that a lot. SolarShare has done that on most of their arenas that we have our solar on, our standing seam roofs. And standing seam roofs last for a long time. But we can also do asphalt roofs, tiled roofs, all these new fancy metal roofs. And a lot of them, these companies have come with us over the years, and they'll hold up their warranty on their roofs, even though we put solar on top of it. So,
Okay, great. That's very helpful. So if I can summarize, then it's not, if you're thinking about replacing your roof at some time soon, you don't need to worry that much about the type of roof system that you're putting on.
yeah, you really don't need to worry about that.
Okay.
And your roof,
Okay.
one of the biggest things I find from my clients after putting solar on the roof is they realize how cool their house will be in the summertime because of that air gap and protecting that roof from the sun's heat. And they're going to make money just by saving money on the air conditioning in their house before we even turn the solar panels on. So that's a huge.
Okay. Yeah, and it does save your roof. It cools your house down. It does extend the life of your roof. What about penetrations of your roof? Sometimes people are concerned about penetrating their roof system.
Yep.
Is
So
that
we
something that they should be worried about?
No, I've got hundreds of them out there so far. No leaks that I know of. We use metal flashing. Everything is that we use is either stainless steel or aluminum, so it's not going to rust. Our flashing is very big, so we don't have to use any caulking in it. We have UV protected seals, things like that, and so your roof should be in good shape for at least 40 years with what we use on top of the roof. So
Yeah. Okay. Great. Sorry, we have a lot of questions here. One more while we're still doing it. Is there any problem installing solar panels on a townhouse?
uh,
Is there because they're
as
attached
long
on
as,
both sides?
as
Does
long
that
as
cause any problems?
as long as I've done quite a few down in Crombie Park in Toronto, um, that as long as you own that part of the townhouse, it's not like a condo, then you're fine
Right.
to install them.
Okay. Great. Great. Let's see. Let me just take a quick look here. Um, One more thing here. If I had rubber shingles put on a roof, um, they're supposed to be good for adding panels to. Have you heard about those?
Uh, People do a lot of rubber roofs. We would have to look at the particular kind of rubber roof to see the fire rating of it. But if it comes underneath the building code, for the fire rating, it should be fine with solar panels. So,
Okay, great, great. One final question here before we move on. Thanks, Bob. What about replacing the roof after panels have been installed? I know that that's not ideal because once you put the solar panels on, these things last for 25 years. So we're explicitly trying to avoid that situation.
yeah,
And I know that we deal with that sometimes at SolarShare where we've had to plan in advance. If the landlord says, listen, I want to change my roof in 10 or 20, 10 or 15 years, then we need to cost that out because it's not an easy thing to do and it's kind of a pain. But maybe Bob, you could expand on that.
yeah. So all our installers do have a program, to remove the solar panels themselves and have it re-roofed and then put the solar panels back up. It's not that big of a deal. There is a cost to it, and when that time comes, that's when you'd probably get your quote. And a lot of times we can still leave all our lag bolts in, our flashing in, and the roofing companies can go right over them. So we're not taking the whole thing apart. We're not starting from scratch. And you also may find that down the road that there may be better solar panels on the market, more efficient ones, higher wattages that you may want to change them out, and we would do it at that point as well. So
Great. Thanks, Bob. Okay. And if we don't get to your question now, we will do our best to get to it at the end. I'm trying to work through them so that we have because there's somewhere there's a spot in the future where I know it'll be a good time. So we're going to get to them. Don't worry. Sorry, go ahead, Bob.
yeah, so maintenance. We do a lot of maintenance at SolarShare. We keep our systems up and running. We have a lot of moving parts, especially in our trackers and stuff. Residential solar basically has no moving parts. Panels really don't wear out. Panels come with anywhere between a 25 to 30-year warranty on them. We do use a lot of maximizers and microinverters, so we can tell which panels are producing properly. If something goes wrong with that panel and you got a microinverter, it's going to email your installer and the homeowner right away saying there's something wrong with it. And that doesn't happen very often. And then inverters are sort of the only thing that have electronics in them, and they're the only thing that can go wrong. N-phase microinverters have a 25-year warranty these days. One goes wrong and they'll replace it for free for the first 25 years. String inverters usually come with a 10-year warranty, and then you can extend them up to a 20-year warranty on them for replacement. You still have to pay for the labor for the technician to come out and change it out, but everything basically is good for the first 20 to 25 years on your roof. So,
and a question, Bob, about like for panels. What about something like a hailstorm? How
yeah,
do panels do with that? Can you talk a little bit about that?
sure. I mean, you could basically walk on a panel. I don't recommend it, but it's the same glass as your car windshield. When's the last time you had a hailstorm where your car windshield actually broke? Um, they're very durable, strong. You don't have to worry about anything like that with them.
Okay. Okay. And I'm curious about also about snow loading and stuff. Like people, like we say it here on the slide, but you shouldn't really go up on the roof and try and remove the snow. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, so we don't recommend, when we do our calculations, we calculate the amount of snow. So if you're in the city of Toronto, we would actually put a pollution factor in for how much power you're going to make. If you live in Barrie, Ontario, you're going to get a huge snow factor because they're in the snow belt, or in Ottawa as well. They have a lot more snow and the snow stays around. And we calculate that into our programs to give you an accurate number of how much power you're going to make over the whole year. So we don't particularly like people getting up on the roof to shovel them off. Panels are very slippery. So we just leave the snow up there. And there is a machine that you can buy for $200 off Amazon that's called an avalanche rake, that you can basically take the snow off your panels if it's like a 1 or 2 story building, just by standing on the ground and taking the snow off it. So,
Okay, great. Thanks, Bob.
so monitoring is one of the big things. I do a lot of monitoring on all our sites. The monitoring programs for residential are pretty self-explanatory. They give you lots of data. They're fun things to watch. A lot of people put a little widget on the bottom of their screen on their desktop or their laptop just to watch to see how much money they're making. And they start to correlate it that when it's sunny outside and you smile, it's not because the sun, it's because you're actually producing power. So these things are really great. The other thing is they'll also email you, or if anything goes wrong, if the power goes out, if the inverter goes down, if you have a ground fault, anything like that, it'll email you, and it'll also tell you what you should do. And there's usually lots of tech help as well. And a lot of the installers themselves keep these online and they look at them on a regular basis for you. So monitoring is a very good one. And you can always have it on your iPhone or laptop, pretty much anywhere.
And so you can really, like if there's a problem, your system, any sort of system, reputable system you get should alert you on your phone.
Yeah.
And you should be able to. Sometimes you can correct it yourself. Sometimes you might have to call someone, but that
Yeah.
would be relatively rare.
Yeah. And you may have to change some of the settings when you first get it. One would be that you get a system installed in the summer and then the first snow comes and it warns you that your panel's not producing any power, and it's because there's snow on it, not because there's anything wrong with it. And you can adjust that to not email you again at that time of year. So
Okay,
they are very smart. So
great. Yeah, technology.
yeah.
Oh, sorry. Sorry, it's taking its time here for some reason. Um, Sorry, everyone. For some reason, my computer's having a moment. Let's just talk about some questions here. Can you talk about a little bit about more efficiency for solar panels, or is that? Can you talk about it? I guess in general, because my sense is like efficiencies for solar panels have generally improved over the last, say, 15 years, quite a bit. Do we expect that to continue?
Yeah, we definitely expect that to continue. Solar panels used to be in the 8 and 9%. We're running up in the 20% right now. And I think you're going to see up in the 30% probably in the next 3 or 4 years as panel gets better. Some of the stuff that we've done, or the solar panel manufacturers have done, they've come out with bifacial panels, which are basically cells on both sides of the panel. So it takes the reflection off the snow or off the roof and reflects it on the back of the panel, and you can produce up to 20% more power with it. The other neat thing about that is that the panels themselves, when they're covered in snow, the back cells start to move. The photons start to move on it and start to heat it up, and will make the panel melt the snow faster, and the snow will fall off quicker as well. So
Okay, great. Sorry, everyone. I'm just getting my screen back here. Thank you for your patience. That should work now. Okay, there we go. Did it. Okay. There we go. Okay, thanks for that, Bob. Let's get into how this all works.
Okay. Basically, we take our solar panel DC power, we invert it from DC to AC, and we pump it basically back into our loads of our house. And then if we need extra power, we can take it from the utility company. So we can put one panel up. That's enough to start, reducing your loads in your house, and then you can expand it from there as many as you want. The larger the array you get, the more it's going to power up your house. And then if you have any excess power, it's going to pump it out to the grid. So the way net metering works is that the grid is basically your battery system. And you make power from your solar panels and your meter turns in one direction. And it basically gives you a credit. When you use power, your meter will turn in the opposite direction and it'll take your credits down. And hopefully at the end of the year, you break even. That's why we need your hydro bill, so we can see how much power you're producing. If you're thinking about buying an electric vehicle in the near future, we should be adding that into your loads as well. If you make too much power at the end of the year, you basically give it to your LDC, local distribution company, for free. And if you use up too much power, you're going to have to pay the difference on the bill. So even though your size of the system may not cover your whole bill, it definitely will reduce it. So this is a typical microfit program is ended now. Basically, we had panels, an inverter, and we pumped it through a meter, and we would get paid for it.
And Bobby's, yeah, so this is how SolarShare system works. So if you have a fit contract or a microfit contract on your home, the electricity actually isn't flowing through your home at all. It's going straight to the grid without going into your home, which is sort of the difference between what we do now and what we used to do.
Yeah. Okay. So behind the meter, net metering is when we pump it into your house. We go right into your electrical box. If you got a 100 amp service or 200 amp service, it's usually will do. If you got a 60 amp service, like a lot of people do in Toronto still, you may have to upgrade it, but normally we don't have to upgrade it. And basically, behind the meter means that we are not pumping any power out to the grid. You're going to be using all the power. And that's where, if you can't get connected through your local distribution company, you can always do behind the meter. We like to do net metering as well. So we use the power first, and then whenever access goes out to the grid and gets credited. So we can also add backup systems now to your roof. So your roof can still produce power. The grid can go down. We can put the power into batteries. Your house will still stay energized. We can also do this with microinverters now, which is fairly new. We can do it with string inverters, and we have lots of new technology of batteries, and there's less and less sort of maintenance on that kind of thing these days. Lithium-ion batteries, there's nothing to maintain on them. They don't have any off-gassing on them or anything like that. So battery backup systems are becoming very, very popular. And we can also hook your generator into this as well. So.
Right. So if you have like a natural gas generator, a backup generator, or something like that, you can connect it in. Can you talk a little bit more about batteries? Is it a good idea to suggest, because the batteries cost a lot of money, and so I assume it depends on the context and if you really want that backup power. And can you also talk a little bit about any restrictions on batteries and having them inside the home or where you need to? We've heard things about batteries lighting on fire unexpectedly and stuff like that. Can you talk about any regulations that you need to be aware of?
Yeah, you have to look at the regulations and the battery types that you're using. ESA has different regulations on batteries where you can locate them, what type of room they have to be in, what type of off-gassing the battery. So if you have lead acid batteries, they're going to have off-gassing on them, so they're going to have to be ventilated. AGM batteries with a absorbed glass mat batteries, you can put them pretty much anywhere in your house. Lithium-ion batteries are one of the ones that ESA is working on very hard, because there's a lot of mixed feelings about them. we've heard a lot about fires and things, and most of those are not solar batteries. They're not the high-end batteries. These are batteries that are on electric bikes, kids' toys, laptops, things like that. The batteries that we use in the solar industry don't heat up. Um, they're not like a Tesla battery in a car. They don't have cobalt in them, so they don't get hot, and they're very well maintained. So you'd have to look at each situation where you can install the batteries inside the house or outside the house. The nice thing about it too is that you're not putting more carbon into the atmosphere when you have a generator. And you don't have to put a huge battery system on because you're just going to do the important things, your fridge, maybe your furnace, and maybe a plug and a light in a hallway. So you don't have to, use a huge amount of power. So you don't need a lot of batteries to do the minimal in it. And as appliances get more efficient, you get more efficient fridges and stuff. The battery banks have gone way down in size as well. So.
Okay, great. Thanks, Bob.
So typical microinverter, which goes underneath a panel. It turns your panel basically from DC to AC right away. So it's very, very safe. I've installed thousands and thousands of these microinverters. They come with a 25-year warranty, and they're quite good. And then we also have our string inverters, like our Fronius, which is a very popular brand, Solar Edge, there's a whole pile of them. And your installation company can give you pricing on different kinds of inverters. And then you can pick which one you want. And potentially, if you want to do a battery backup system, you may want to pick an inverter that's going to handle that as well. A lot of the new inverters will handle batteries and solar panels and wind all at once. So you can also look for that with your installers. So.
Great. Okay, on to the costs and savings and stuff. People are interested. I know we're sort of at 45 minutes now. We'll take another 5 minutes to wrap ourselves up and then answer some more questions. Okay.
Cost, the average cost is about $18,000 for a 5 kilowatt system. You're probably looking at up into the $30,000 mark for a 10 kilowatt system. And that's not with batteries, but that's pretty much installed. And that should include your building permit, your ESA permits, and all that kind of stuff. You can always start smaller too. I mean, that's the nice thing about microinverters, that you can put 1 or 2 panels up and you can grow it year by year. Putting more panels, more inverters. They're more like a plug and play system. Simple payback, it's in between 8 to 15 years, but it also depends on your loans and your grants. You can get loans these days that are interest free. So it makes the payback a lot better. A lot of people are getting these home improvement loans as well. And you can also get some grants and things like that from the government to help you out as well.
Yeah, so let's talk about that a little bit more.
Yeah, we'll talk about grants in just a second. The cost, this is sort of broken down to, how much per watt. Each house is going to be slightly different. All depends on location, the height, how difficult it is to install, any upgrades you need to your electrical panel. So the cost, this is just a cost of, approximate what cost is. Buying a package deal from an installer will definitely save you a fair bit of money. So. And then Chris, I think next is a bit about,
we got a little bit,
savings. Ken Ria said you're going to save 11 cents a kilowatt based on the time of usage. A lot of times LDCs will take you off the time of usage when you do net metering, and they'll put you on a flat rate, which a lot of my customers who own electric vehicles like that, because they can charge their car at any time at the flat rate. And of course, they are hoping that their solar panel is going to cover the cost of charging their car anyways. The other thing about the savings, every time the hydro rates go up, which we have twice a year, our hydro rates go up in Ontario, that you'll be saving more and more, and the return on your investment will get better and better as these rates go up over time.
Mhm. Great. So there are a couple of grant and loan programs that you may be aware of. So there's the Canada Greener Homes Grant. In Ontario, it's delivered by Enbridge. So you can get $1,000 per kilowatt installed up to 5,000. So up to, if you do 5 kilowatts, then you can get up to $5,000. It can be on or off grid, but you need to install a minimum of 1 kilowatt of capacity. And you can also have a battery system that is incentivized by $1,000. There's also the Canada Greener Homes loan, which is up to $40,000. It's an interest-free loan for up to 10 years. One of the important things here is you need to have this energy assessment process in order to make this work. So you need to go and have an energy assessment on your home, and you have that advisor has to include solar or batteries or whatever it is in that assessment so that you can be eligible for the grant. Then there's also a follow-up assessment following that to make sure that you've installed it. That's paid for as part of the grant. It's $600. It's paid for by the grant, but you will only get compensated after it's all done for that. The other thing to note is that there are grants and loan programs at municipalities. For instance, the city of Toronto. I don't mean to pick on Toronto or Ottawa in particular, but just the point is that check in your own municipality where you live, and there may be opportunities for grants or loans in your jurisdiction as well. So how about we talk a little bit about some of these questions here. Let me see if I can pick back up on a couple of things. So Bob, can you talk about solar hot water a little bit more? And tell us, is it possible to install solar hot water? Do you see that happening a lot? Are there incentives to do so?
I do see a fair bit of solar hot water. It is getting away from the old vacuum tubes and the water and the pipes going up onto the roof. What we use these days is a thing called a SIBO inverter. It's like a microinverter. And basically, we're using PV panels now that take wild AC from the solar panels, and it brings it down into your hot water tank. And you can use just an electric hot water tank that you buy at Home Depot, and you can plug it straight into it, and it produces hot water for you. The great thing about that is there's no pipes up on your roof, there's no glycol, there's no worry about leakage of the pipes, things like that. And it's very, very simple to install, and it's become very, very popular. And basically, it's a microinverter that goes under the panels. It can take in 4 panels up to 400 watts each, and you can put more than one microinverter together. A lot of people have done this for up in Georgian Bay on their islands where they don't have hydro and they don't want to use generators, or they don't want to pay the huge amount of money for batteries to heat up their hot water tanks, that they can do it directly into their hot water. And you can always leave the top portion of the hot water tank still plugged into the grid, just in case it's covered in snow for a little while, that the top elements will still take power from the grid and heat up your hot water, so you won't be without it. So,
okay, great. Thanks. Can you talk a little bit about if you're adding PV or batteries at a later time, do you still need a building permit in that case? Can you talk a little bit about that? Any requirements if you're sort of adding to your system?
If you're adding to your system, you'll have to change what we call a single line diagram, which your installer would make up for you, or electrical engineer, and you would have to have another ESA inspection. So that's ESA is Electrical Safety Authority. So,
okay, got it.
And you just one more note there, that ESA, you're going to need that certificate. So if you do your own installation or someone else, because that's what your insurance company is going to want from you. So,
got it. Can you also talk a little bit about going back to rooftops? Can you talk about how much more advantageous it is to have a south-facing roof? Like, I've always thought, if you have a south-facing roof, that's the best. If you don't have that, then you're out of luck. With the microinverters, my understanding is that has sort of changed because the way that the strings work doesn't impact it as much. Can you talk a little bit about that? And also, about shading, and like if you have big trees in front of your house or buildings or something? Can you talk a little bit about those kind of challenges?
Yeah, so if you got shading or if you want to go east and west, we do recommend either maximizers, which is a device you can get with like Solar Edge inverter, and it basically turns each panel into their own individual panel, and the power goes through each panel separately. Same with microinverters. So if one panel gets shaded, the other panels still produce power. The nice thing about going east and west, that you're only losing roughly about 5% of the power than being due south. But the other good thing is that if it's raining in the morning, that and sunny in the afternoon, that you're going to collect that sun on the west facing part of your building. So it can work best in both ways. So I wouldn't hesitate to put panels east, south, or west. So
Okay, great. How wonderful. And shading, same kind of thing. Is that, what are your concerns
shading,
about?
yeah, shading. You can also get a quote from your installer, or what happens if you cut that tree down or you trim that tree. What's the difference in the amount of power you're going to make? In my own home, I've got some 200-year-old white pines that I don't want to cut down, and yes, I lose some money, but I prefer to keep the trees. So yeah.
Okay, there you go. I love trees too. Probably a lot of you on the call do. Can you talk a little bit about running a heat pump or a solar hot water tank directly from PV? Is that something that people do? Is there any benefit from running your heat pump or your hot water tank from electricity from a PV system directly, or how does that work?
You can run it directly. There's quite a few out on the market these days. There's a company from Australia that's now into Canada that markets PV panels with a heat pump for your air conditioning in the summer and your heat in the wintertime. They're do-it-yourself. They come pre-charged. Very good. With things like net metering, I would recommend going straight net metering and hooking your heat pump just up to your electrical panel, because it's going to save you the same amount of power and it's just going to cost you a little less. So
Okay. And can you talk a little bit about electricity delivery and any savings by prioritizing how you use the electricity that you're generating rather than feeding it into the grid? So I guess you'd probably need a battery in that case, and then you're sort of arbitraging for the grid. Can you talk, is that something that's happening right now, given
yeah,
that there's different tiered rates? And also in the context of, if you're right now, say on an ultra low rate, would you be forced to go on a flat rate if
yeah.
you put in solar?
So all depends on the LDC in net metering. If you're behind the meter, you can have batteries that you can load up your batteries when you have and use the power from your batteries when you're on high peak, and then you can charge them up again from the solar panels or charge them up from the grid when you're at low. And this is called peak shaving. All you're doing is trying to use the power from the utility in your solar panels when it's at the least amount of cost on them. So, and we have lots of great Solarc is one of the inverters that we use that can take critical loads, diverse loads. It can take grid power, it can take solar power, and it can take batteries, and you can combine them all comes in one really nice box. All the breakers, everything is built into it, and it's very, very simple to install these days. It doesn't take up
Okay.
um,
Great, thank you. So we're gonna speak to a couple more questions. I'm going to launch a poll now, though, for all of you to fill out. Thanks. So we're a couple of minutes away from the end here. Sorry if we don't get to your questions, but we're eager to hear your feedback. So I'm going to launch that poll now. Please take a couple seconds to fill it out and tell us what you think we might want to talk about in future. We can certainly do more of these solar webinars for your home, and there was lots of questions. Thank you for all your questions. I think it's really great. We like to have a discussion like this and make sure that we're trying to answer the questions that you have. But luckily, we have friends around us who know a lot of stuff about renewables and batteries and decarbonization and impact investing. And we'd love to know if you'd like to hear from us more, or our friends, about some of those topics. So please let us know. Thank you. So a couple of things. Chris says that, not me, Chris, a different Chris. He says Enbridge must, you must be heating your home with Enbridge provided natural gas to qualify for those grants. So I wasn't aware of that. So do be careful about what the requirements are for that. And there's some other requirements there. Apparently, the federal program may run out of money in 2024 as well. There was a CBC News story apparently this morning. So thanks for sharing that. Let's see, can you talk a little bit, one more question here. Can you talk about the average, how long does the battery last before you need to replace it? Will it last as long as the panels, like 25 years?
So the simplified batteries that we use, they'll last, it goes by cycles. They can go up to 27,000 cycles. So you're looking at anywhere between 25 to 35 years now on a typical lithium battery. An AGM battery are the other ones that we use, which is a leaded batteries. You're probably looking around 10 to 12 years. All depends on who designs the battery bank and how big it is and how much it gets drained, how low you drain them. Lithium ion batteries are great because you can drain them down 100% and you need a lot less of them. The downside is a lithium battery, can be up around the $3,000 mark, where you're looking at a lead acid battery that's around the $400 mark. So it's a big difference, but you get a lot more age out of them. And the other thing is there's no maintenance on them. So that's one of the great things. There's nothing you have to do with them. And they're very safe. They have their own computer in them. They have their own switch, so you don't have to wire them up live like you do a car battery, things like that. So
Awesome.
Big difference in price. So
yeah, great. That's great. So we're out of time, unfortunately, for this round. But don't worry, we will do more of these. It looks like it was useful for most of you, so that's really great. If you do have questions that didn't get answered, our apologies. Feel free to email them to invest@solarbonds.ca, and we'll do our best to respond to you as soon as we can. Thanks again for your time. Thanks again for your participation. Thank you to Bob, Jen, and Marina for all of your help organizing this. And thanks most of all to all of you who were able to join us. We really appreciate it, and we'll look forward to seeing you next time. Thanks, everyone.